Okay. Okay, so welcome to class 51, Bible Prophecy Israel, the book of Revelation. And so we're starting, or we're looking more slowly, carefully, and in depth now in Revelation chapter 17, 1. So I was just speaking to Emily and Monica about one of my favorite Bible teachers named David Hunt. And I showed you a book last week. I found a quote, and it's Emily, if you can please read the first quote that starts with the most astounding prophecies.
The most astounding prophecies in the Bible are found in its last book, known as the Revelation. Of all the glimpses of things which must surely come to pass, Revelation 1:1, which John reveals, none is as intriguing and staggering as a vision recorded by John in chapter 17. Dave Hunt, A Woman Rides the Beast.
Okay, very good. So we don't have this translated in Portuguese, but just looking at it, there's probably maybe there's an adjective and a verb that might be new. So the most astounding prophecy. So astounding, does anyone have an idea what astounding is? It sounds like a similar word that you might already know of.
Astonishing.
Exactly. Astonishing. Okay, very good, Emily. So one of the most astonishing prophecies in the Bible, and astonished is like, oh my goodness, you're astonished. And then another word, I think intriguing, you all know, but staggering. So staggering, do you know what staggering? It's like to stagger. It's an interesting verb. It's one of those that kind of sounds a little bit like it's that it is or what it means. What do you think?
Something static.
No, it's actually so to stagger is kind of like it's like you're falling, you're staggering. So it's as though you're falling in steps. You go, oh, boom, boom, boom. So to stagger when you walk is you're almost falling.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, staggering is then something that's like, oh my goodness, like it's a synonym also for astonishing, but it has more of a connotation of being spectacular, beyond imagination. Okay, so staggering is because you look at this prophecy and your eyes like this, and your mind explodes because the prophecy is so incredible. Okay, so let's go back now to review the first verses of Revelation chapter 17. So Monica, can you please read Revelation chapter 17, verse 1, please?
Okay. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great war that sitteth upon many waters.
Very good. One suggestion, it's great whore. Okay, so I think you said like war, as in a battle, but so it's not an easy word, and I'll go directly to e veio dos sete anjos que tinham as sete taças e falou comigo, dizendo-me, vem, mostrar-te-ei a condenação da grande prostituta que está assentado sobre muitas águas. Okay, so heavy verse. Ju, can you read question 1, please?
Yes. Is the great whore sitting upon the ocean?
Okay, so we're reviewing what we discussed last week. So what do you, it's what, so it says that sitteth upon many waters. Is the horse sitting on the oceans? What do you think? No, she isn't. It sounds like it. And in fact, the next verse, the Bible often interprets itself. So the context is always important. And often with visions and prophecies, we're given the vision and then it's explained to us. Thank God. So in Revelation 17:15, the next verse, John, or rather the angel speaking to John, explains it. So Emily, can you read Revelation 17:15, please?
And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues.
All right. So, and so, sorry about that. E disse-me as águas que viste onde se assenta a prostituta são povos e multidões e nações e línguas.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. And so that makes it pretty clear. So 17:15 is saying the waters is not the oceans. Okay, so he's speaking symbolically. And now they're explained to really be peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. So that sounds like all nations. Okay, so the whore, the great whore, is sitting over all nations. In other words, she seems to control or have influence or be over all the nations. Very strange. Okay, so let's go to Revelation 17:2. And I think, is it Monica, please? Can you read Revelation 17:2 in English?
Which the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication.
Okay, very good. And that is, como a qual fornicaram os reis da terra, e os que habitam na terra se embebedaram como vinho da sua fornicação. Wow, you can see that each verse of Revelation chapter 17 is very heavy, very powerful. So let's go to question 2. So Ju, can you read question 2, please?
Yes, which is in view here, physical or spiritual fornication?
Very good, thank you. So what do you think? Do you remember from last class?
Spiritual.
Yes, absolutely correct. So let's build more on that. So Emily, can you read question 3, please?
What is a broad definition of fornication?
Okay, so we see the word fornication a lot in the Bible. So it's a good Bible word. You know, you don't hear people saying fornication much outside of Christian churches, correct? Right? It's not a common word now in society. But so what's a kind of a broad definition of fornication in the Bible? What do you think? It's a sin, but it's but what kind of sin? What is it talking about?
Sexual?
Yeah, fornication. What does it mean? What's a good definition for fornication?
I don't know the word in English. Traição?
I'm not sure I heard you. But you try in English, because your English is so good. So you have to search for like a synonym, something similar. I think maybe so you're saying like betrayal?
Not really. Like cheating.
Exactly. Okay, cheating, that's good. and that's gonna get even closer to the question 4, but a broad definition of fornication in biblical terms is any sexual act outside of marriage. Okay, so any sexual act. So only within the marriage bonds, needless to say, only between a man and a woman, right? A sexual act within marriage is wonderful, it's beautiful. But any sexual act outside of marriage is fornication. Okay, but so let's go. Monica, can you read question 4, please?
What is a more specific biblical name for that sin?
Okay, so we even have a more specific, and it's a little closer to what you were just saying, Emily, but there's a very specific biblical name for the sin of fornication. So think of it. Okay, so it's inside marriage. The sexual act can be beautiful and productive and very, very healthy. Outside of marriage, any sexual act is
Adultery.
absolutely right. Okay, so that's exactly the word I was looking for. And when we think of adultery today, and this is why I asked what's this, it's like a biblical name for it, because adultery today is only a married person and an unmarried person, correct? So it's like cheating on your wife. You have an affair with a girlfriend. You're married, you have a wife, and you have an affair, a sexual affair with another. That is what we call adultery today. But in the Bible, it's broader than that. It actually calls any fornication, really fornication and adultery are almost synonymous. Okay, so again, adultery is any sexual act outside of marriage. So now why am I asking these questions? Let's go to question 5. And so, Ju, can you please read question 5?
Yes. What then do you call a bride of Christ fornication with kings?
Okay, that's the verb. So bride of Christ fornicating with kings. So what do you think? So all right, so the bride of Christ is what? It should be the church. Okay, so the true bride of Christ is us. But I say it intentionally, a bride of Christ. And if a bride of Christ is fornicating with kings, what does that make the bride of Christ? In other words, sorry?
An adulterer.
Absolutely right. Because obviously bride of Christ means you should only be in a spiritual relation with Christ. Okay? So the bride, which is us, is in a spiritual relationship with Christ. But if a so-called bride of Christ is fornicating with kings, then Emily is absolutely right. That bride of Christ is an adulterer. And another word, whore, prostitute. Okay, so you see why, all right, now we're slowly getting to, okay, why is this called the great whore? Because we haven't fully discussed who the great whore is. But now we're starting to get an idea. Okay, why whore? Well, maybe. And so when you think of a bride of Christ fornicating with kings, can you think of anything historically or contemporaneously, currently? That's an example of a bride of Christ fornicating with kings.
The Babylon example.
That's a good one. That's true. I'm not sure that, and we're going to talk a lot more about the Tower of Babel, right? But that wasn't a, back then it was not a bride of Christ. It was a religious system. Okay, and you're absolutely right that a religious system was created in the Tower of Babel, which is exactly where Babylon is, right? So that's an example of a religious system, but how about an actual bride of Christ? So we have to come up to obviously sometime after Christ's presence on earth to think of examples to a bride of Christ fornicating with kings. Well, there's an early one, and that was, sadly, the early church with Emperor Constantine. Okay, you remember what happened from our Bible, we looked at it in the Bible history class, that Emperor Constantine in 313 converted, and all of a sudden, all the Christians, all the born-again Christians, the church was so relieved because before Emperor Constantine converted, Christians were being killed all the time, all right? So martyred. And so when Constantine said, oh, you know what? I'm a Christian too. And so having a Christian church is okay. We're all part of the same family. Well, Emperor Constantine was not part of the same family. Okay, he was a pagan emperor, and all he wanted to do was to bring the Christians in to control them, right? Within a few years, he was burning down every Christian church which did not come under his direct control. And so the early church made a huge mistake. They were the bride of Christ, and they fornicated with Emperor Constantine. Okay, so unfortunately, that's an example. So, the early church for centuries was beautiful. They were in small home churches, right? Small gatherings, because you couldn't have a physical building. You would be persecuted, you'd be killed. So they were meeting in homes, they were joining together, they were praying a lot, and Christianity was spreading like wildfire all over Europe. And then Constantine, and they were being martyred and massacred. And then Constantine said, you know what? I can't beat them, so I'm going to join them. Okay. So that's an example. So the early church made a huge mistake in believing Constantine, right? Because they didn't want to be persecuted and massacred anymore. Say, oh, okay. Well, we're so glad you're now one of us. Emperor Constantine was not a true Christian. So how about another example of a bride of Christ fornicating with kings? Well, what did Constantine create? He created eventually the Catholic Church. And the history of the Catholic Church is the church, right? The church fornicating with kings. It was completely secular, pagan, wars. The Pope was in control of armies, and he was allying with Emperor Charlemagne here, or the King of France there. So the church was completely in bed with kings. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples. So let's move on. So Emily, can you read question 6, please?
When was the last reference to wine?
Okay, so why are we asking this? Because back in Revelation 17:2, talking of the great whore, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So when was the last time wine was referred to? A few verses early. Okay, so here it is, directly below. So Monica, can you please read Revelation 16:19?
Okay. And the great city was divided to 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance
France.
before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath.
Very good. Okay, so another powerful verse. E a grande cidade fendeu-se em 3 partes, e as cidades das nações caíram, e a grande Babilônia se lembrou Deus, para lhe dar ao cálice do vinho da indignação da sua ira. Okay, so there's the cup of wine again. So we've had wine, and this is now, remember, chapter 16 is still part of the chronological order. So it's like boom, 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 boom. Now chapter 17 and 18 are parenthetical. So chapter 16 gave us, it gives us things very summarized. And so it gives some, so things happen very quickly in chapter 16. Now in 17, we're elaborating. And so we already knew then that the cup of wine, okay, of wrath, it has something to do with Babylon. And now that very similar words come up again. And so let's look. Jude, can you read question 7, please?
What does wine likely represent?
Okay, so do you remember, what does wine likely represent? I think you told us last week, Jude. Do you remember?
Yeah, blood.
Absolutely right. And this is disgusting, right? Revelation 17:12, it says, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So if you think of it, it's made drunk with blood. That's pretty gross. I mean, it's disgusting for us to think of that, right? So it's like, wow, that's we're getting into some heavy images. Okay, so to summarize, Emily, can you read question 8?
Is the whore more likely an actual person or a symbol?
Okay, so what do you think?
A symbol.
Yeah. Because if you think back, so at this part of the vision, we're already dealing in many symbols, right? So John says, what the 7th angel says to John, come hither, I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Many waters is a symbol. So we already know, and it's explained later what the sitting upon many waters means. And we just looked in the idea that kings are on the earth have committed fornication. So we'll learn more about the great whore, but it does not seem to be one person. Okay, whereas the beast eventually finds full fruition as the Antichrist. It can, the beast represents other things at times, but it does become one person eventually. But the great whore does not seem to be one person. We'll read more verses, but it seems that she's an incredible image of a vision that represents something. And so that's what we're going to look into now in some more detail. So now we're going to go very slowly, but we're going to look now into who is the great whore. And so, Monica, can you read Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, please?
Okay. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and then 10 hearts.
Okay. And and let me read that for you. Elevou-me o espírito a deserto e vi uma mulher assentado sobre uma besta de cor de escarlata, que estava cheia de nomes de blasfêmia, e tinha 7 cabeças e 10 chifres. Okay, so now we're back to some incredible imagery. And once again, it doesn't sound like that, this is an actual physical beast. But let's see, here's an image. You can see quite an old painting. And so it's a depiction of the great whore on the beast. And here's the beast with the 7, where are we? There we go, the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And in this depiction, it looks like that's the 7th angel who is showing John, okay, Apostle John, this image. But again, it's more, this vision, it educates and informs us of some very important things. But we don't, does this beast actually exist? Will we see it on earth at some point? Okay, not likely. We hope not.
It's just an illustration.
Exactly, or it's a vision and there's deep meaning to it, but it's more symbolic than actual. So this verse also leads us to believe that, okay, we're talking still in images here, in a vision and symbols. So let's now go to question A. So Ju, can you read question A, please?
Is the first time John is carried away in the spirit?
Okay, so who remembers from earlier, either in the Gospel of John or earlier in the epistles of John, in the book of Revelation, is this the first time that John is carried away in the spirit? No. Okay, so we don't have time to go to each one, but at the very beginning of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 1, verse 10, and also in Revelation chapter 4, verse 2, which is the famous one where he is brought up. So it is like a foreshadowing of the rapture, that he is brought up to heaven to see some images back in Revelation 4. So this is John is having incredible experiences and visions. What an honor and blessing that God gave all of this. He trusted John with all of this, so John would write it down for us so that we could have it today and discuss it today. So Emily, can you read question B?
To what kind of wilderness is John being transported?
Okay, so again, we're dealing with a lot of, so it says here, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. So what do you think? What kind of wilderness is John being transported to? And I'll ask make it more specific. Or is it in the future? Is the wilderness that he is being transported to in the future, or maybe in the past?
I think sometimes in the past, sometimes in the future.
Absolutely right, Ju. Very good answer. And I think when I've read this, most times I thought, oh, that must be talking about the future, right? Because we think, oh, a woman sitting on the beast, the great whore, that's all happening in the Great Tribulation, right? So that's future. But I've been reading more about this. Perhaps a better interpretation is this starts well in the past. Okay, so think of it that way. So in the next several verses, think, well, perhaps where John was transported back to an older time. And then let's think together what time that was. So Monica, can you read question C in English, please?
Who is the scarlet colored beast?
Okay, thank you. So this is not easy, but it looks like, okay, so John has just showed, he sees an image of a woman sitting on a scarlet colored beast. So I think we know, as I already mentioned, the beast eventually, during the tribulation, becomes melded, transforms into one person, the Antichrist, right? So we know, so that the beast, and we'll go into the specifics in a minute, because the beast is mentioned in prophecy a long time before, okay, in the Old Testament. But a scarlet colored beast, that sounds kind of royal. It's a little bit different. So let's think of this beast as going in far into the past, and it could even go as far back as Babylon, okay, as the first beast in a way, because it and then also it could be perhaps the Roman Empire. And remember, there's the Roman Empire back around the time of Jesus being on the earth, and there's also a future Roman Empire. So just to throw that out there, so maybe the beast also is representing something now. So let's go back to Revelation 13:1. And so Jude, can you read Revelation 13:1, please?
Yes, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy.
Very good. There's the I guess it's the word upon, just a little bit of a different,
Upon.
yeah. So the emphasis is more on the upon, but very good. So who has that in Portuguese? You don't have to hear my Portuguese every verse.
A besta que saiu do mar, viu uma besta que saía do mar, tinha 10 chifres e 7 cabeças, com 10 coroas, uma sobre cada chifre, e em cada cabeça nome de blasfêmia.
Okay, so as you can see in Revelation chapter 13, John receives this incredible image focused on the beast. So the beast rises up out of the sea. It has 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, that's exactly the same number as in Revelation 17:3, right? Because it says having 7 heads and 10 horns. So it sounds like it's the same beast. And then it even goes further, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And I highlighted or put in bold name of blasphemy, because that's also what Revelation 17:3 says. Okay, names of blasphemy. So just we're tying together that this must be the same beast. But now, when have we encountered the beast much earlier in the Bible? So let's go to question D. Emily, can you read question D, please?
Prior to John in Revelation, who last wrote of the beasts?
Okay, so who remembers? Who knows their Old Testament prophets? And this is a major prophet. It's a major Old Testament prophet. It's not a minor one who wrote of the images of the beast or beasts quite a lot. So who remembers? So when you think of the beast or beasts and all sorts of strange images, which Old Testament prophet could that be? Who do you think?
Daniel.
Absolutely right, Emily. Good. Okay. Because Daniel, if we remember, he receives all sorts of visions and dreams. He interprets King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Okay. And so that's exactly right. And so then, Monica, can you read what is Daniel 7:7 in English, please?
After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong, exciting,
Exceedingly.
Exceedingly.
exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It
I'm sorry.
devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, so I'm already here. So depois disso, eu continuei olhando nas visões da noite, e eis aqui o quarto animal, terrível e espantoso, e muito forte, a qual tinha dentes grandes de ferro. Ele devorava e fazia em pedaços, e pisava aos pés, e que sobrejava. Era diferente de todos os animais que apareceram antes dele e tinha 10 chifres. Okay, so there we are. We have the 10 horns, but now notice this is Daniel's fourth beast. Okay, so he already spoke of 4 beasts or 3 before, and now we have a dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. Now, I think you remember, we won't go into the details of the 4 beasts, but each beast represented a different empire. And so let's now look at the next verse, which is also from Daniel. Okay, so Daniel was in his vision, and he already in Nebuchadnezzar's dream told of the future empires. And now in chapter 7, he speaks of the future empires using beasts instead of the image of a metallic man. But let's take a look at this. So Daniel 7:23, that would be, so Jude, can you read Daniel 7:23, please?
Thus he said, the 4 beasts shall be for kindle upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kindles, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces.
Okay, the verb there is, it's better pronounced devour.
Devour.
Okay, so devour the whole earth. And so disse assim, o quarto animal será o quarto reino na terra, o qual será diferente de todos os reinos, e devorará toda a terra, e a pisará aos pés, e a fará em pedaços. Okay, so let's jump directly to question E. Emily, could you please read that in English?
The prophet's beast represents what?
Okay, so who remembers? Who knows their Daniel well? So which kingdom? So it says it's a kingdom. It's the 4th kingdom. And remember, Daniel is back in Babylon. Okay, so if you remember, the 1st kingdom is Babylon. And then there are a couple of others. And then the 4th kingdom, which shall devour the whole earth. and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. What kingdom or empire is that? Who remembers? The Roman Empire. Okay. So the question is, maybe the Roman Empire, did it devour the whole earth and break it in pieces? Maybe not. It was a very powerful, but remember there's that very important phrase and concept, prophetic compression. And it's within one verse, sometimes the time jumps 2,000 years. And so it's just a possibility. So maybe what shall devour the whole earth and shall tread it down and break it in pieces is the revived Roman Empire. Okay. Of when? Of the tribulation period. Okay. So who remembers? Monica, can you please read question F in English?
Horns represent what and why are 10 horns important?
Okay, so who remembers what horns represent? It's kind of, there's crowns and there's horns coming out of the crowns sometimes. Does anyone remember? Well, the horn, well, no, bigger than that. In a sense, the horns are actually kings. Okay, and crowns, they tend to be kingdoms, but sometimes it's, horns, kingdoms, they're synonymous. So let's think these are 10 kings. All right, when it says 10 horns, it's 10 kings. So why is the number 10 important? All right, well, we're gonna see this in the Great Tribulation, that it seems to be the exact number of the kings of the Antichrist empire. But what's fascinating is that also was the number of toes in the metallic man. Okay, so if you remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and we'll get to that in a second, Daniel chapter 2, you have 10 toes. So maybe those 10 toes are the 10 kings. So let's keep on going, and then we're going to see an image in a second. But so Jude, can you read question G, please, in English?
G.
G, yeah. So it's at the top of the third page.
Jumping forward for hard, the four beasts likely represent what?
Okay, so it's jumping forward. So a little more of the emphasis up front. So forward. Okay. So what do you think? So now remember, we've maybe been mostly in the past. So so things were okay. We're talking perhaps about Babylon as a religious system. Maybe we were talking about the original Roman Empire. But now, what does it seem the fourth beast is representing? Well, the revived Roman Empire. So let's take a look quickly at and this is a little more complicated. You see that this is an incredible chapter. It's a little bit complicated, and we'll have time for questions and comments. But here, so this is the metallic man. Oops, that isn't what I wanted. Well, I was hoping to make it bigger. Okay, we got it. Okay, so I'm not sure how well you can see that.
Here we can see it really well.
Okay, great. So you remember, here's Daniel chapter 2, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the metallic man. And we won't go through all of it again, but the legs are of iron and they're Rome. And what makes that so prophetic is actually the Roman Empire split, right? When the Western Roman Empire split from the Eastern Roman Empire. So Rome split from Constantinople, today Istanbul. And so hence the two legs is appropriate. So it's like Rome is already split. And then you get down to the feet and we have the 10 toes. Okay, so we won't go into the details, but just to show, all right. So maybe the legs were the divided Roman Empire, all right, because the Roman Empire started back in 168 before Christ, and I think the Roman Empire ended around 476 AD. But now we're talking about a revived, so the feet down here, and maybe in tribulation, the revived Roman Empire. Okay, so things are getting you see how all of these incredible visions, all these incredible verses from the Old Testament are now feeding into what we're seeing in the most incredible chapter of all Bible prophecy, according to David Hunt. Okay, so the most astounding prophecies in the Bible are found in the last book, and of all the glimpses of things which must shortly come to pass, which John reveals, none is intriguing and staggering as the vision recorded by John in chapter 17. So we're spending some time slowly in this vision because, as David Hunt says, it's in the most incredible vision that's full of meaning for us and perhaps even lessons for today.
Ben,
Okay.
can you send us the picture later?
Yeah, gladly. Okay. I picked up. I'm going to check to see if the details of that image looks like the text is good before, but with pleasure.
Okay.
Share that. Okay, so I think Emily, it's back to you. Can you read question H, please?
Does Daniel prophesy such a revival?
Okay, so we just surmised that jumping forward, the fourth beast. And remember, now in Revelation, it doesn't talk about the prior three beasts. We're only now focused on the fourth beast. And if it's it becomes the revived Roman Empire, does Daniel prophesy such a revival? Well, it's in the next verse, and it certainly looks like it. Okay, so let's read. So Monica, can you please read Daniel chapter 2, verse 44?
Okay. And in the days of these 10 kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
Very good, thank you. Mas, nos dias desses reis, o Deus do céu levantará reino que não será jamais destruído. E este reino não passará a outro povo, esmiuçará, e consumirá todos esses reinos, mas ele mesmo substituirá para sempre.
A difficult verse.
Those future tenses, and also I never saw that verb before. So what do you think? Look, what is Daniel talking about? So first of all, if we're something in a new kingdom comes, it consumes all the prior kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Is that what is that kingdom? What does that kingdom have to be if it stands forever?
God's kingdom.
God's kingdom.
Exactly. Okay. So it says, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom? So yes, this sounds like, okay, this is God's kingdom being set up at the end of when? The tribulation period. So starting with the millennium and then into the eternal phase after. Now, why is this so? Why is this perhaps a prophecy? Well, it says, and in these days, and I put in brackets 10 because that number is not in this verse, but in the prior verses, it's clear that Daniel is talking about, there are 10 kings, 10 kings. So in the days of these 10 kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. Well, did the Roman Empire ever have 10 kings at the same time? Okay. And so all of a sudden, then that has not happened yet. And so when will it happen? Now. Okay. So a revived Rome Empire under the Antichrist, under the beast, will have 10 kings. Okay, so then Daniel is talking about he prophesies the revival because it didn't happen in the past. There never was a Roman Empire with 10 kings. So now it has to be in the future. So Daniel is prophesizing of something still in the future. But then let's look, Ju, can you read question I? And now we're finishing up. Question I in English, please.
What makes this revived empire so special and evil?
Okay. So what do you think? So there's been a lot of empires on Earth, and this one is going to be really, really bad. So what is one reason why this is so special and evil? Well, it's in the next verse, but what is the next verse talking about? So let's take a look at that. Emily, can you read Revelation 13:8, please?
And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world.
Okay, so and we're going to look some more at chapter 13 next class, because remember it's already telling us about the beast, and it's already telling us about what happens in the tribulation period. But this is incredible. Revelation 13, chapter 13, 8th verse, which I should read, e adoraram todos os que habitam sobre a terra, esses cujos nomes não estão escritos no livro da vida do Cordeiro que foi morto desde a fundação do mundo. So this is all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. Okay, with a few exceptions. Okay, because there are some people on earth whose names are written in the book of life of the Lamb. And who would that include? That would include the 144,000 likely Orthodox Jews who convert to Christ and are sealed, protected. And there are others. There's remnants. There are others who survive. So not everyone worships, but this is saying almost everyone on earth worships the beast. And so what makes this revived empire so special and evil? It's worldwide and it's religious tyranny. Okay, because we'll go back to it. But what happens if you don't worship the beast?
You get killed.
Exactly. Okay. And one reminder, this is not, when was the last time this more or less happened on earth? What does it remind you of? So now in the past, when was the last time that you had to worship the emperor, the king? When was the last time? Well, the Roman Empire. Okay, so why were the Christians being martyred in the first and second and third centuries? Because they refused to worship the Roman Empire. All right, they said, no, I have the true God, and I do not bow, I do not idol worship, and that's why Christians were martyred. Because now remember, the Romans, they believed in a whole bunch of gods, but you had to give all authority to Caesar, to the head of the Roman Empire, as the chief god. And if you didn't do that, okay, so you could see what's coming on earth is just a worse version of what's already happened. And it makes sense. So we have the old Roman Empire, which included idol and king worship. You had to worship Caesar, and in some, you also had to worship Emperor Constantine. Okay, and then he softened that somewhat when he converted. But now, when we come up to the tribulation soon approaching, that is going to happen again. One has to worship the emperor, the tyrant. Okay, so that's the class for today. It's a little complicated, all right, because the images are very rich. And we're just beginning really in Revelation chapter 17. As you can see, well, we only really covered the first 3 verses. We visited verse 15 for some clarification, but there's a lot of material here. So any questions or comments, please?
I have one. I don't remember how many countries are there in the European Union, but is it because of the number 10 kings that some think that the European Union could be the place where the Antichrist comes?
Yeah, and we'll go back to that subject next class. Why we believe, and it's not just in the verses we looked at today. In fact, there are other verses from Daniel chapter 9, where he speaks of the prince of the people that come, and it becomes fairly clear that the people he's referring to. The people he's referring to were the people of the Roman Empire, and the prince that shall come is then the Antichrist on top of the Roman Empire. So we'll confirm some of that. As to the number 10, the European Union may at one point, when it was growing, have 10, but that doesn't matter. It has, I think, more than that now, even after Great Britain left. But what it seems to say is either the European Union will have 10 countries, 10 organizations, 10 leaders,
Okay.
or the world does. Okay, so that like maybe one leader will be for, I don't know, North America, another will be South America, and then you have 10, it adding up to 10 for the entire world. We don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Well, with pleasure. All right, any other comments or questions? It's a little confusing, all of these images and what do they represent? And they often represent more than one thing. Okay, so the fourth beast is becoming the beast, and the beast represents not just the Antichrist eventually, it also represents something else, and then who the great whore is and what she represents. It's a little confusing, but patience, we won't have complete clarity until we get to heaven, but maybe that's not too far away. Okay, so a little bit of patience. Any more comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to stop this. I'll just stop the, oops. Stop the, there we go.